need-to-know basis.
Good morning, Commissioners. Welcome to the start of our first hearing for the FY22 budget process. A few housekeeping things that are out there. You've got an agenda in front of you. We do have a break set up, and I don't believe you need your laptops before the break. So as we work through getting those set up, everything you're looking at right now is going to be on your iPads and will also be on the screens and has been on Dropbox for you. So today's schedule is a very similar process to what you've seen in the past. Our meeting dates are today, the afternoon of June 14th, next Monday, June 15th after the commission meeting, and we'll see if we are done by then or if we need to schedule additional meetings after that or not. I anticipate that many of the department heads are on Zoom, either are on Zoom or are watching on YouTube right now. So, and I can tell that usually because we sometimes get texts during the meeting with questions they may have or comments and comments afterwards that we go through and hear. You know, every year has its idiosyncrasies that go into it. 2 years ago, you were faced with figuring out a 27th pay period for $1-point-something million that was being dropped upon us. This year, you worked in the accrual for payroll. For FY22, you're going to hear some different things about, because we're in building projects, about FF&E, and we'll talk a little bit about ARP, which is not included in any of the budget at this particular point. But we will briefly talk about that, and you may hear it referenced just on occasion for that. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. The first priority is to go through the PowerPoint that the auditor's office has put together, and Ben and Kim are going to walk you through a lot of information. And just as an FYI, department heads do have a copy of this at their desk that they received yesterday.
I don't know if this was busy here a minute ago. I don't know if somebody's supposed to be on the phone or not, but if they are, they may have been
Double check.
disconnected.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll turn it over.
Morning, Kim.
Good morning, Commissioners. We're going to start by reviewing where we are year-to-date in 2021. So we'll review some of our monthly reporting that we normally present at commission meetings. The first chart we're looking at is a chart of the cash reserves in the general fund, showing that we have $43.2 million in cash reserves as of the end of May. That's up about $410,000 from last month, just due to additional property tax payment collection activity in the month of May. And these balances, will remind you, include $13.3 million of coronavirus relief funds that were received at the end of 2020 and first part of 2021. We will have a recommendation following later in our presentation regarding cash reserves. So we'll cover some additional information on that in a few minutes. The second chart is showing cash reserves in the highway fund. They stand at $5.4 million at the end of May. That's down about $656,000 from last month, and that just reflects typical seasonal construction spending. So next we're going to look at revenues, year to date. And here you see that we have recognized $32.8 million in revenue. That's about 50% of our budgeted revenue for the year, which is trending favorable to where we were last year at this time when we were at 48.4% of our budget. We'll take a more detailed look at revenues on the next chart, where we're just showing the collections of property taxes. And here you can see we've collected $25.9 million of property tax already. That is about 53.7% of our annual budget. And that is trending ahead of last year, which was at 52% of budget at this time. We collected actually $3.3 million in the month of April, and compared to 2022, we've collected $1.6 million more than, versus 2020, we've collected $1.6 million more in taxes. The next chart then includes all revenues excluding property taxes. Here you can see we are also well ahead of last year by about $500,000. We've collected $7 million in revenues. That's 40% of our budgeted other revenue. Compared to last year, we were at 38.3%. The biggest driver of this trend is in the Register of Deeds office, where recording and transfer fees are $300,000 ahead of where we were last year. And then in the jail, our Board of Prisoners revenue for housing inmates is $200,000 ahead of where we were last year. So, any questions so far? Yes.
Kim, thank you. The funds that we got rebated from GOED on the CAFO down by Turner County, is that reflected in this?
We have not received that money at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to expenditures now. First of all, total expenditures, we're running, as a percent of budget, we're running almost dead even to where we were last year at this time. We've had $26 million in expenses. But I've got two other graphs that break it down a little bit further. So we'll look at personnel expenses. First of all, we've had $17 million in personnel expense. That's 37.2% of our budget. We've paid out 11 payrolls so far this year. 11 payrolls would be the equivalent of about 41% of our budget. So you can see we're trending favorable to budget for this year. Compared to last year, we're trending favorable as well because we've had fewer payrolls through the end of May in 2022 than we did in 2021. We'll catch up. The number of payrolls will equalize when we get to July. So you're going to see this favorable trend continue for a couple more months. And then if we look at all other expenses, excluding payroll, we're at just over $9 million year to date. That's $2 million higher than last year, 42% of our budgeted expenditures. The big drivers of those expenses are in the jail related to the contract services for medical care for inmates. We're $1.3 million higher year to date than we were last year at this time. And then the Board of Prisoner meal expenses are also ahead of last year by about $130,000. In addition to those, we're expending some grant funds in 2022 that are pushing our year-to-date expenses higher. But on the flip side, we had grant revenue that we're just dispersing in this year. So those include the MacArthur grant and the One Sioux Falls Shelter Care grant.
Kim, are any of those expenses related to COVID?
They were. The One Sioux Falls Shelter Grant was a private grant we received through the city to provide shelter care during the. Okay. Do you want to go on then? Okay.
Okay, morning, Commissioners. So I'm going to cover the rest of the presentation here from the Auditor's Office. We're going to talk a little bit about our cash applied. So this is kind of our historical view of what we've used. Our cash applied, normally it runs around 8%. Kind of to help us kind of visualize this, we did normalize our actual change in cash balance by taking out the well, in this case, $10 million of COVID money, COVID-related funds that were received through 2020. So it kind of gives you a visual there of what we used in the past, how much of that is the 5% kind of reserve, and then the rest is how much we actually took out of our excess cash balance. Next is, so we were asked to kind of look at, see if we could provide some analysis on our cash balance and how we might be able to use some of that going forward. So this is our attempt to do that. So we did a couple of things here. The first, we took historically, what we've actually, our expenditures and our revenue has been, what we've used for opt-out funds and we've used for cash applied, or what our cash balance has been. And then we projected that out kind of forward for the next 5 years, using some assumptions. So we, for our expenses and revenue, so we made an assumption that our property tax revenue would increase at a 4.2% rate going forward. That'd be 2023 through to 2026. Also, we have 3% increase in our other revenue, and then assumed a 5% increase in our expenditures. So that gives you that view. And then just what would we need to do to fund that type of revenue expense mix? So for 2022, we wouldn't see any need to increase the opt-out balance, but then kind of you can see out through 2023 and then forward, we would use the remaining, we got about a little more than $4 million of opt-out capacity that's available. We would use that out to 2025, where we use the maximum amount, and then we'd starting in 2023, we would have to start to use some of our excess cash balance to balance our budget. So you could see that by 2026 that we would have used, or worked down our excess cash balance to around $8 million, and at the same time fully utilizing our available opt-out capacity. So I guess maybe the net story here might be that sometime in 2024, 2025 is when we'll have to start looking at what we want to have for opt-out capacity, and whether the straight line 5% increase in expenditures is something that we can live with. Okay. So any question on this slide, since it's a little new?
Appreciate you putting the slide together. So it's basically in 2 years, we really start digging into our cash balances.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
And the opt-out,
Yeah. So we was.
already scheduled or is not?
Yeah, that's the capacity you have already, right? So we've got about a little more than $4 million in opt-out capacity that's been approved.
But even with the increase in the opt-out, our cash reserves,
Yeah, we'll have to start using those to fund that type of balance.
and do those cash reserves include the CRF money or not?
No, they do not.
They
Yeah.
do not, okay.
Yeah.
And then we're going to start seeing opt-offs fall off.
Right. So then at some point in the next few years, we're going to have to start looking at our opt-out to see if we want to either increase the capacity, because we do have some that will start to fall off in 2025, 2026. Okay. Then I'll look at just some of the history of our opt-out what we've done. So you can see that back in 2019 was the last time we increased our opt-out. We've been using $1,750,000 of that for the last couple of years. Our recommendation is use that same amount for 2022. And that would leave us at $4,750,000 still of opt-out capacity. Okay. So then Kim mentioned that we do have a recommendation for our excess cash. So when we received the coronavirus recovery funds, that allowed us to supplement some of our expenses in 2020. So it kind of allowed us to build up some additional excess funds. That's in our general fund. One of the state statutes is that we can only have a general fund balance of up to 40% of our expenditures, and we think we're going to breach that level by the end of the year if we don't assign that $13.3 million to something like the building fund. So that just seems to be a logical place for it. So we kind of just listed the state statute there. We we've consulted with the Department of Legislative Audit. They said as long as we assign the funds to something like the building fund, we have the capacity or ability to return those to the general fund without any risk. So that's going to be kind of our recommendation, is that we assign that $13.3 million to the building fund for potential future project needs, and then that would prevent us from exceeding that 40% capacity, and we will have other monies that we'll receive in probably 2021 and 2022 related to stimulus monies, but those will be assigned to a different fund as well.
Mr. Chairman, Ben, so how much money do we need to find a home for there? Is it 3 million, did you say, that we need to put towards the building fund, or?
13.3 is what we're recommending. That's what we
Okay.
think we have excess.
That's better than 3.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions on that?
Is there been any more conversations with the Treasury about the next anticipated grant from the feds for?
Well, yeah, so just this morning, we received notice that our application was approved. So we will start to receive, I think we'll receive around $18 million additional stimulus funds in 2021, and then next year we'll receive an additional $18 million, so total of about 38.
Okay. How does that affect the reserve?
So those funds will be assigned to a different fund, right, so that we'll have additional cash balance, but won't be in the general fund.
So those will be restricted under another account? Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Then I'll move on to our conversation, just what are the 2022 budget as far as what we see for revenues. So just, again, a kind of a historical view there of what we've seen for revenues, again, calling out the balance that we received in 2020 for CFR monies. This year, or for 2022, we're forecasting just under $69 million in general fund revenues. That's about, that's 73% of the total revenues, so it's kind of consistent with our history. You can see the opt-out balances were continuing to hold flat, and yeah, so that's kind of how we get to those balances. Any questions? Okay, I move on to the next one. So just property taxes. So there, that would show a total 2022 budget of over $50 million, of which 38 million is property tax kind of pure, then 11,375,000 is the opt-out funds, and then a little $600,000 of the back taxes and interest. But looks like, the revenue projections just continue on their normal path. This next slide might be a little more helpful as far as the property tax breakout. So you can see what our projections are and historically what we received. So for 2022, our just general property taxes at $38.2 million, the opt-out levy again at $11.4 million, and then our back taxes and interest for a total of around $50. That opt-out represents almost 23% of our tax revenue. And then how we get to some of the impacts of that. So as you all know that we can increase our budget by CPI and growth. So this year we have CPI of 1.2%, gave us $440,000. Growth was 2.6%, so that gave us another $960,000. So for a total of $1.4 million, or an increase of $3.8 million. So I know there's been some conversation too about CPI is running quite hot, I guess you might say, in 2022, probably in that 4% range. If that continues, we just a reminder that we are limited to increasing our budget by up to 3% CPI. So if inflation was 5%, we'd still be limited to our CPI increase by that 3%.
CPI or 3%, whichever is less.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So inflation will not necessarily be a friend to us.
Okay. I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 second, Ben. Just as a courtesy for everybody that may be on Zoom or on the phone, we're getting a very infrequently, but still some extra noise. So if you're on the phone, hit your mute button. If you're on Zoom, please mute yourself. Less disruption, the better. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would just point out, and Cindy knows this well, that in the past we've suggested to the legislature that we change it to the CPI or 4%, whichever is more. Isn't that right, Cindy?
I don't remember what it was.
But there was a limit to it.
Instead of the lesser, we were looking for the
Whichever is
greater.
less.
Yeah.
So, and it didn't go anywhere, but we're not the only county that has that issue.
Yeah.
In fact, we're probably less worried about it than Jackson County or Bennett County or some others.
And historically, the last 10, 12 years, the CPI has been well under that, but if we look forward, we just don't know, and if we start hitting some pretty high CPI numbers, it could have an impact on
Well,
us.
there would be a cap on it, but still not whichever is less, because that doesn't account for our real expenses.
Also, we have a very abnormal year and years coming with the federal government dumping money on us. And so we have to also continue to figure out how we're going to go forward, because someday all those funds are going to dry up and we're going to be back to that 3% or less. And we just need to figure out how to move forward correctly.
Mr. Chairman, and as Cindy said, you know, we'll be back to that point of just the CPI. And so if we don't raise taxes, then, you know, by the CPI or whatever is less, then we won't be able to catch up when the federal gifts cease. In fact, I am aware of another government entity that had no taxes. It was a township, no taxes, and when it went into effect, they could raise their taxes by 3% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less, but they had no taxes, so they couldn't raise it at all.
Zero is less. Okay, Ben.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. I don't know if you've done any calculations, but if we use the 13 million for one payment reduction in debt, what that would have for an effect on our general fund expenses?
We will go through our debt payments here a little
Oh,
later,
okay,
so we'll
sorry.
be,
Look ahead.
yeah,
First time in my life.
but yeah, at some point we have a slide on that. And maybe that's in our other slides, right? But I'm not sure if it's, I want to guess somewhere around 6 million a year, but I'm not sure if that's the right number.
She's shaking her head. I'll
Okay,
assume it's
all right,
correct.
so, yeah, so I kind of on that vein, right, I know that the city of Sioux Falls used that, they paid off their debt in advance. Just remind us that they have a little more flexibility and be able to issue debt than we do, so we'd have to figure whether that was beneficial to us long-term. Okay. I will move on. So then continue our review of other revenue. So this is charges for goods and services. You can see there that, you know, the top ones, jail fees are 3.5 million. Registered deeds is at 2.7 million. Again, that's kind of the one that, you know, those top two are really increasing. The registered deeds, I think we're actually on a run rate to probably be at 3 million, if not higher this year. So, you know, we can, that might be a conservative estimate there on that revenue side for registered deeds. As we continue to see home sales in the community, just, you know, be at high levels. They have a lot of activity down in the registered deeds office. Intergovernmental revenue here. So the first one, Air Guard, that's just a pass-through. We provide the security services there. But the other one, probably the bigger one there, the bank franchise fee that we received. So that's kind of that very hard one to forecast. We received $2.5 million from 2020. We've got $1.2 million forecast for 2021. We're feeling a little confident that that's going to, will exceed the 2021 budget, just looking at some of the history. And then, so we've increased that 2022 budget on the bank franchise tax to $1.7 million. Again, that's just one of those numbers that's hard to forecast, but I feel like, we've been just a little too conservative in that in the past.
Mr. Chairman, Ben, did we already receive our bank franchise tax for this year?
No, for 2020, we received that $2 million.
Okay.
$2,279,000.
Or a couple weeks we'll get that other money?
No, that usually comes after the first year.
Okay.
All right.
We never know exactly what it's going to be.
No, and we haven't found anybody who can do a good job explaining to us how it's calculated. So,
The voluntary tax.
miscellaneous revenue. So probably the biggest item there you'll see is interest income. So we all know that interest rates are extremely low, but just because of the volume of excess cash that we have at the bank, we still receive interest, even if it's a basis point. When if you've got a balance of $20-30 million, you're still going to get some income there, and that's really what we reflect there for 2022. That $200,000. It's more of a volume impact than it is rate. Okay, and then this is just a chart that shows the fines and forfeitures state's attorney's office collects from people who don't show up for their bond hearings, those sort of things. That's been kind of declining slightly, I guess, from prior years. I go to the next slide, licenses and permits. So looking for around $315,000 there. That's mainly building permits and things from planning office.
Ben, I've noticed from our building permit reports, and I thought I kept the last one, but our building permit numbers are like double. So, I mean, are we going to see an impact? Have you looked at that? Or?
We haven't looked at that specifically to see that. I don't doubt that we would have some increase. I'm just not sure if it's material to our revenue that we would look at.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I don't doubt that we would have increase, permits. We haven't looked and see how much that might equate to in revenue.
Okay. Thank you.
Then general fund expenditures. So for 2022, the budget request are around $71.5 million. And one of the bigger drivers of that, obviously, the public safety are our biggest component of that. It's up about 6%. And then the general government services at $14 million, about 600,000 of that is from elections. So in 2022, we'll have a general election and budgeted for that. And the rest of the items are close to what you would, just normal growth.
I do have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
With the census coming out, numbers in November, I'm assuming, we could have additional liquor licenses available in the county. And I know in, 2018 and 19, we must have sold a couple. Will we have available more, possibly?
That is a possibility, but historically, we have not budgeted or counted on any of that activity.
Okay.
That is a possible consideration, though, for 2022, that an additional license would be available.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
What's the fee in Minnehaha County for a liquor license?
Well, that also is based on population, but the licenses we sold in 2018 and 19 generated about $190,000 each.
Okay.
So it's a sizable number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Cindy, if it's near Sioux Falls, they pay the same as Sioux Falls. If it's near Sherman, they pay $1,500.
Okay.
But I think, Mr. Chairman, you brought up a good point about the population, because some of our, Children's Home Society or something, or the mental illness people, it's $1 per citizen, isn't it, Cindy? That we have to give them in our budget? So,
Yes.
Southeastern, yeah.
so it could go up a substantial, 50,000 or something.
Good point.
Ready?
Right. So, and I think as we go through this, you'll see that there's some other revenues that aren't included in our budget that you could consider, right, for offsetting some of the expenses that we have.
Okay.
So anyway, that's the general revenues. So then we're going to call out just some of the major budget variances so you understand what's creating those. So for 2022, revenues at 68.9 million versus expenses of 71.5, about $2.5 million increase in expenses. That compares to 2021 increase of 1.6, or about a $900,000 increase there. So just so we note that the opt-outs were balance we're keeping at 2021 levels. We do include a 1.5% matrix adjustment for salaries, a 15% insurance increase. So any new positions that departments have asked for, we have not included in the budget. We'll layer those in later. Outside agencies, we've kept the budget flat to 2021. Equipment requests are included, so the things like new vehicles for the sheriff's office, those are included. And then FF&E and the state's attorney's request for software have been excluded from the numbers that you see.
Does the 5% reserve, excuse me, included in the revenue number projections?
Well, no, we back that out.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Dollar amount by chance?
We have that later on. I think we'll show that in our scenarios.
Okay.
It's around is that 3.5 million?
I'm going to
Yeah.
assume it's 5% of 69 million,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, 3.5.
Yeah, it's only other
Yeah,
property.
only in property
Oh,
taxes.
okay.
Okay.
Still 59 million, so, yeah. Okay.
So as far as variances on the revenue side, so 2022 is 68.9 million again versus the 65.7 in last year, a $3.2 million increase, or 4.9% increase. Items that make up that variance, so we have property tax growth of 2.6%, or 900,000. Bank franchise tax, as I talked about, we increased that by 500,000. Registered deed transfer fees, increased that by 500,000. Property taxes due to CPI, 400,000, and then, let's let you look at the rest of those, but that's kind of the major drivers of the revenue variances. I move on to the salaries and benefit variances. So 2022 salary and benefits about 46.7 million versus last year 45.7. That's $1 million increase, 2.3%. So as we probably remember, we have a 26.5 pay periods this year because we went to our new process in 2021. So that'll save us about $720,000 in the budget. The 1.5% salary adjustments of $560,000, health insurance $336,000. And then, staffing changes due to reclassifications, promotions, those sort of thing, adds another 328. And then salary and benefit increases at a little over 300,000. Okay.
So the 1,132,000 is the sum of those numbers, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And then looking at expenditures and the variances there, I won't go through all these, but, some of the major ones. So we had a $24.7 million request this year. That's up $3.1 million from last year, or 14% increase. That's made up of, you have the jail contract increase of almost $900,000. Elections, I mentioned earlier, that's $512,000 here. Juvenile alternatives have increased in shelter care, $170,000. Human services, hospital and burials, another $160,000. So the sheriff's office, so the lease rental agreement for the upgrades to the law enforcement center, another $150,000. And that I'll leave the. If you have specific questions on these, I won't go through all those. Go ahead.
I have a question. So, on the bottom, we removed the jail detox due to triage. Where did we put in the expense of what the triage, is that just in the jail contract, or obviously we're paying something for the link. And so
Yeah.
where did that increase end up at?
Well, I don't think that's an increase. I think we had,
We did have a $450,000 budget built in for 2021,
Yep.
anticipating some additional expenses related to startup.
Yep.
But we backed that back down to $400,000 in 2022, which correlates to our joint agreement with all the participants in that
And
project.
is it just like in the sheriff's budget, or is it a line
It is
item
in
link?
its,
It'll be
we've
a
got
line.
a separate department set up
Okay.
specifically
This
for
is just
triage.
a decrease.
right, so that's what, that second to last item there on that list is the removal of that detox.
I just was wondering where the expense was coming at. Since we pulled that out, I was wondering, where did that end up at? So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. So this is the means of finance schedule that we put together for you. So this is on all the major funds that we manage. So general fund, highway fund, building fund, debt service fund, and our emergency management fund. So general fund, you can see these are the numbers that we've been presenting so far. So our revenue, $68.9 million. With our 5% holdback, so it gives us a total means of finance of $65.3 million versus the appropriations total of about $71.7, which equates to that cash applied balance of $6.4 million. On the highway fund, expect revenues there of about $14 million versus appropriations of $12.5. So that negative 1.6 would indicate an increase in their cash, or their cash applied balance. Building fund, so we have revenue there of about 4.6 million, or I'll net it down 4.3. Appropriations of 6.4, so this includes the $3 million budgeted renovations for that administration building, so that's why we would be spending more there. Debt service, that's kind of just flat, and then emergency management is flat as well. Okay. Any questions on that? If not, so this is kind of, I guess, probably the meat and potatoes of where we wanted to get to. This is our different scenarios that for you to consider, just to kind of see if we take the budget as requested, and then make some changes, how that might impact our cash applied balance. So
Okay.
Yeah.
This is what we want to see.
yes, I think this is the culmination of all the revenues compared to the expenses. How do we possibly balance the budget?
Okay.
All right. So again, the top section on the cash applied, this is the 6.4 million that I think you might have seen throughout the presentation. So if we were to, I had mentioned that we had held out several items. So if we add back in like all the new hires, like there was like 9 positions plus some grant funded positions, that would cost $776,000. The FF&E of $600,000. So this would be, again, for the administration building, the the annex that we're remodeling, payment for all those FF&E related costs. State's Attorney Office has requested purchase software of $250,000. Outside agencies, their total budget request is about a $400,000 increase this year. So that's about $2 million of additional expenditures. Normally, we work at a cash applied ratio of about 8% of cash to our expenditures. So that's what 5.8 million would do. So our logic here on and why we present this is like for FF&E and then the software is those are one-time expenses, and it seems to make sense to pay for those out of our excess cash. So that's how we've kind of layered those in here. So if we took all those requests, that leave us a budget shortfall of about $1.8 million. Okay, that would be funding all the requests for positions, vehicles, other FF&E and all those items. Yes.
I have a question. On the bottom, illustration assumption says hiring half,
Right.
one half of requested. So is it all or is it one half? So
So that is for illustration 1. So let's go through
Oh, okay.
that,
So we
right?
were-
So on that second column where it says
Okay,
illustration
sorry.
1.
Yep.
So what we've done there is, so the first budget request, that's just as requested.
Okay.
Right? So if we said, well, what if we only funded half of the positions, that would reduce that expense down to $388,000. Still continue to fund the FF&E out of our excess cash, as well as funding the state's attorney software. Outside agencies, we would only fund them at 50% of their request. And then we've identified on the court's budget, so they have a budget of around $2 million this year?
2.2.
2.2, right? So, but their expenses are running at around a 1.8 annualized rate, right? So they forecasted, or they requested a budget of 2.4. And we know they won't get there in 2021, and we're not sure even 2022 seems like a $2 million a budget would be more appropriate for them the way their expenses are running. So that's what this reflects, is that our recommendation of reducing that court's budget by $400,000. So I think they pretty much, what they did for 2022 is they took their 2021 budget of 2.2 and increased it by 6 or 9%. Just not looking at where they're actually spending funds. So not saying that they won't need that at some point, but I guess I would say maybe we should wait till that need develops before we actually fund it.
There's been talk of leasing courtroom space in Lincoln County and them approaching us. Is that, I mean, would that be factored into this in any way? I mean, that's
Yeah,
that's
no.
6 figures.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay.
Yeah. So if you took those scenarios and you would reduce your deficit down to around $850,000, right? Take off about $1 million. So then another option, illustration 2, some similar things, funding half the positions that have been requested, continuing to fund the FF&E out of excess cash. We do have a $100,000 request for marketing spend. That's coming out of the commission office, so we would take that out.
what's the
Yeah,
marketing
what is
expense?
that?
Want to talk about it now, or do you want to talk about it later?
We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, vaguely, okay, yeah.
So, yeah, then the vehicles, we're funding just this, in this scenario too, funding only the sheriff's office request. And then also continuing to reduce the court's budget by $400,000. So that scenario would get you down to a deficit of a little over $500,000. And then finally, what we did was we need to look at revenue is, we talked about there's some revenues that we have some opportunities in. So we kind of looked through those and basically substituted increased revenues for our shortfall right there. So we think we're somewhat comfortable that the registered deeds will have that extra 250,000. We just had a side conversation about the liquor license adding potentially 200,000. Commissioner Barth had asked about the South Dakota reinvestment funds. There's like 400,000 that's not in any of your numbers. So there's some other revenues, I guess, that that we don't have in the budget that might be considered as a supplement.
Build-in licensing for medical marijuana, we could probably.
Yeah, so so there's some opportunities here, I guess, to kind of look at that potential revenues as that we might want to budget for.
Okay.
So those are the scenarios that we wanted to share with you, and I'm sure you can pick and choose from those. And then on the next slide here, we did just extended our cash applied analysis. So I showed you earlier. So that 6.4 million that is coming in from the budget request, that would equate to 9.8% of appropriations. So obviously higher than we've run historically, but I think we have more excess cash than we do historically, right? So, you took out, we've proposal to pay for the FF&E and the software, that would get, you took those out, then you're almost back to your 8% cash applied level.
Okay.
So it's not, I think the 9.8% looks a little bit bigger than it really is, but.
Those projections you did for us earlier, does that assume taking out that excess or that money from the excess cash for FF&E?
Yes, it does.
It
Yep.
does, okay.
Yeah, it assumes putting that in the building fund.
Okay.
Ben, so if we are using some of the excess at this point, are we then going to have to pull in our belts 2 years from now?
Well,
As we've
yeah,
we're
if you-
going up like this, are we going to have to go level at that point?
Again, if you look at, if our revenues are as we forecasted and the expenses, trend, then you would have to start tightening things up at some point.
Okay, thank you.
And then lastly, we thought this might be helpful to commission. So we just looked at where would we think the levy might fall out with the budget that we were presented, right? So showed there what our property tax budget is expected to be in 2022. And now the preliminary abstract values, or that's the value of all the properties in the county. That's kind of an estimate. Those probably will change somewhat. So this is, again, just kind of a hypothetical situation here, but hopefully relatively close. We would look at the levy coming in at, in total, about 3.296. And that compares to a 2021 levy of 3.322, which is down 2.6 cents per thousand. So I think it's a good story to be able to tell people. I realize that your taxes aren't going down, but we're not increasing the levy at the same time, and maybe appropriate in our current cash situation. And that concludes our
A lot of
presentation.
information.
Yes.
And just the amount of work involved in putting that all together. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
Remind me, so we're looking at a 4.2% increase in property tax revenue. Is that?
I think
Yeah.
that's right. I don't recall
At the screen that you put together that I
okay,
had
okay.
requested? Yeah.
yeah.
So is that natural growth?
Typical?
then?
Yeah,
That's
so
our-
that would reflect your CPI and growth from the prior years,
Okay.
right? So, we're just in a good situation that Minnehaha County will continue to grow. Our rate of growth will probably slow just because our denominator's getting bigger and bigger, right? So, but we'll still receive incremental increases from growth.
So even though we're looking at a 4.2% growth in revenue, we're looking at a levy that's decreasing.
Right, because we can spread it out across a much bigger base, yes.
Just to interject, our combined growth in CPI factor was 3.8.
Yeah. I'm gonna say, this sheet's
3.8.
different.
Okay.
The other revenue growth is happening in areas like Register of Deeds and bank franchise tax.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
That's
Right.
what got us to 4.2.
Okay.
Just
Any other
going ba-
questions?
Sorry. Just going back to the general fund assumptions that you made about those 3 illustrations.
Yes.
Didn't hear any of that, Gerald.
Really?
Didn't hear any of that.
Ben. Going back to the cash applied illustrations.
Yes.
That you made those 3 assumptions with. If you use the revenue assumptions that you made in illustration 3 for illustration 1, and then you talked about a couple of other things that you felt might be undervalued, so to speak,
Yes,
you'd be pretty close to the $800,000 shortfall, correct?
that's correct, but, the 250 for registered deeds is kind of an identified one. The 280, you could say, might already kind of includes those unknowns, right? But I think you could add up a amount greater than that 280, like we talked about the
Right.
400,000 for South Dakota reinvestment, the liquor licenses and other things, yes.
And then adding my question, I guess, earlier about the bond payment of what it could be reduced by if we use the 13 million for reduction of debt. What number would that be?
Well, we would have to consider, we would need, if that's was our intent, that would reduce our levy in the bond redemption fund. So you'd basically be offsetting that levy, those levy dollars with cash reserves.
Okay.
So you'd be reducing your income in that manner.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I was thinking through
Okay,
that.
yeah. There's a, okay.
Thanks for all your work. More information than we can absorb in 1/2 hour.
Yeah, I guess we went through that fairly quickly, so if you don't have any other questions, that kind of concludes our part of the presentation. Are we at a break now?
No, we're gonna go to HR.
Okay.
Carrie. And we are right on time, Ben. You nailed it. Thank you.
Let me see. Not sure which one is. Yours? Yeah? If you don't mind.
Good morning. So as Ben and Kim have summarized for you, your budget does include some expected personnel costs. It includes the 1.5% that we're contractually obligated to give as a matrix adjustment. And it includes the 15% insurance increase that we're anticipating may be possible for next year. I want to go through some additional information to help you make a decision on wages. As you know, when we're looking at that, we put in that base amount that we know we need to provide, and then these discussions will include.
1 second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hearing aids today either.
Sound of freedom.
I did yesterday.
Are we there?
Okay.
Okay. So this discussion really is what, if anything else additional, should we be providing to staff? And you know, our goal here is to try and ensure that our our pay ranges keep up with really inflation. So different factors that we look at that to determine whether or not an adjustment needs to be made include CPI, the Employment Cost Index, which is really trying to get a measurement of what base wages are increasing by both nationally and regionally by civilian, private, and for state and local governments. The average salary structure increases information we receive from our compensation consultants on what other employers are doing, again, for base wages nationally and regionally. And then the salary structure increase for comparable entities gives you an idea of what The entities that we use for comparisons have been adjusting. The tricky issue with all of this is we're using 2020 end data, or what people gave as increases going into 2021, to project forward what we're going to need. The grade sections for you really point out where CPI is as of April, measuring 12 months backwards. And the ECI is also a 12-month factor measuring back from March. As you can see from CPI, and as it has been talked about, it's definitely increased since the year end of 2020. This is just a chart of the information that you're seeing on the front, on the first few pages. This is a comparison of CPI to what the county provided for the general increase. And you can see, of course, that as the CPI, what you're really seeing is for the first 2 years, we tend to be on trend or in the area, but maybe a little low. And so the 1 year we made a more significant adjustment. And coming into this year, we had a 2% adjustment, which is higher than what CPI ended for the year, but of course is lower than where we're seeing a trend right now. The next chart is, again, that same information, except it's comparing employment costs and salary structure survey data, so factors other than CPI, which is really more about what salary structures are changing. Again, I want to point out this is not data about what employees are receiving for raises. This is data on what salary structures are adjusting or measure growth in base wages. One other factor that I'd point out here as you're looking at this is we do expect some of these numbers to change, of course, next year given CPI and also the federal contractors minimum wage increase, which is projected to be about a 37% increase for next year. And this gives you a summary of the comparable counties. I want to point out that this is, you know, it's sort of a bird's eye view. I mean, you'll see some spikes here for like Lincoln County. Some entities are providing increases because of wage studies that they've done to maybe try and keep up or catch up with market. Some entities provide different increases to different groups, so what you're seeing here is an average. So overall on this, I just point out that this is, you know, a difficult area for you to assess. We do have a tendency to be fairly conservative and then maybe make adjustments. This year we have some special challenges in that the CPI, which has been fairly low, is now much higher, and I think we're all aware that Sioux Falls trending for wages is increasing at maybe a larger pace. For the elected officials, these charts will look very familiar. They follow the same format as I provided in years past. They're intended to give you a summary of what each elected official earns currently for 2021. And just like our other positions, we go out and gather data every year to see what our comparable organizations are paying. Those yellow columns reflect that comparable entity data. It's a little trickier with elected officials because some entities provide wages based on a matrix and some pay a flat rate, and so you can see more significant variances in there. The last column gives you a sense of internal equity, meaning what their chief deputy will be making as of next year. And then the next chart really provides a listing of where those elected officials are paid in comparison to non-elected. Every year I point out that, remember, you're looking at 2021 data to determine an increase for 2022. I would use it as a guide because some of those variances that we've talked about, but just remember that all those comparable entities will be doing what we're doing right now and looking at an increase. You've approached this in two different ways in the past. Sometimes these budget hearings have had discussions about what you want to provide in actuality for the elected department heads for or for the upcoming year. And I believe last year was the first time maybe we put in a percentage, and then you had that conversation at the year end for the elected department heads, because we have to have that conversation each year as part of the resolution. So a couple different approaches for you. The next couple of slides gives you information on insurance premiums. I've been in the unhappy position over the last couple of years to come and give you the bad news that our health fund costs have been rising significantly. I'll just point out again that those conversations have occurred after many, many years of very good experience and low increases. This is a variable that can change quite a bit. What I'm showing you here in this chart is the reserve balance that we've had in place for the past few years and the total cost of the plan for each of those years. That April 2021 line, that 6.4 million for the total cost of the plan, is an estimate based on our experience so far. Really what that April data is telling you is we've had a good few months of this 2021. The next slide gives you sort of a breakdown based on a monthly basis, what our costs are for all those things that go into our health and our dental plans. That includes our health claims, our prescription claims, dental, administrative fees that we pay, and stop-loss fees, or premiums rather. The column with the estimated increase is what we would expect to see, both based on trend and what we're seeing nationally. And that gives you an estimated increase for 2022 of the 15%. The one thing I would point out here, which might be interpreted as pretty good news, or at least I do, is that $373,000 figure that's highlighted for you is an updated estimate that's based on our total experience from last year. And November and December, honestly, were bad months for us. So that increase, which is why we look like we're underfunded for 2021. Is that if you looked at it just based on our experience so far this year, I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic that we wouldn't need the full 15%. It's just so early in the year to really give you a good estimate on what our projected expenses will be for, you know, a year that's still 6 months away. So, because I think the 15% is a good conservative estimate for right now. The staffing requests are summarized for you here. For the last couple of years, we've been breaking them down really into two different areas. The grant-funded positions, there's two sections for that. The top section includes your grant-funded positions that have funding for 2022. So there's no change or no expense to Minnehaha County for those. The second area shows the grant-funded positions where we're expecting funding to end in 2021. You'll see that there's two pretrial positions listed there. One of them is an error. The corporal was actually funded for 2021, so we can take that one off our radar. But the request for the pretrial coordinator position for half that funding would end in 2021, and that department is requesting Minnehaha County funds for the remaining portion. For human services, they have an alliance caseworker, which again is partially funded for 2021, and they're requesting the additional funding so that position is fully funded for 2022 by Minnehaha County.
Comment.
Yes.
And that pretrial coordinator, a quarter of that salary is paid for by Lincoln County because we share that with Lincoln County.
That is correct, yep. And the portion that's there listed for you is only the Minnehaha County portion. As far as new position requests, I'm happy to show you maybe a slightly smaller list than you've seen in the past. There are 9 requests for new positions and 1 request for reclassification or conversion of a position to a higher pay grade. For the new position requests, you have a request for an appraiser in training and equalization. The Public Defender's Office is requesting 1 attorney and 1 caseworker. The State's Attorney's Office is requesting 3 attorneys, an admin assistant, and a legal office assistant. And the Treasurer's Office is asking for 1 tax and license technician.
Gary? The attorney in the Public Defender's Office would actually be funded by an increase in money coming from the UJS because of our specialty courts, specifically the Veterans Court, Drug Court, et cetera, where we have been paying the entire cost of those. Other counties with the similar courts get funding for that position. We haven't been, but we've been assured that in the next request, which would be in August for next year, we would have that position funded for about $72,000. So we would basically have to make up the difference between, or maybe 69,000, I can't remember the exact number.
69.
Yeah, so we would be making up about 30,000. So they're looking to add an attorney, but the funding is already, we're already paying for it, and the funding would be compensated back to us from the UJS. So it's almost a zero net sum when we look at it.
And hopefully we'd have confirmation of those funds before we finalized our budget in September. But I think we've been as short as good as we can that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been working on it for about a year, so.
That's gonna have to go through legislature, I believe.
It
No,
would-
this
it-
goes into the UJS's budget.
But that needs to be approved by legislature.
Well, the funding would already
Funding
be
is
there
already
in
there.
2022. Yeah.
The funding is already there, it's just how they're budgeting it.
So would they start paying that, well, their fiscal year, they'll start July 1.
We were told that the request would be in August and funding would begin in January,
Okay.
so, yeah.
The last page of the presentation is just to give you an idea of the growth in the department so that you have some sense of how many positions you've funded or added over the past few years. I'm giving you a projection both for 10 years back and 5 years back. The only thing that I'd really say is for the state's attorney's office, the numbers appear high, but remember at least 3 of those positions were also grant funded as well. So that impacts it a little bit.
Just a question on that, Carrie. So equalization, 2 since 2012
That's correct?
and 2 since 2017, is that 4 or is that 2 total?
No, it's just 2 total.
Okay.
Good question, thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
I think it's pretty well right there in front of us. Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks, Gary.
Yes, how many people are covered by our health insurance?
I don't have the exact number, Dean, but we're about 70% of our employees, and I think when you consider members as well, we're around 900. if I'm
900, and the total annual cost of it is the 744,000? Or,
No, that's just a monthly breakdown to give you an idea. Our plan costs ended at 6.3 million for last year, and that's after reimbursements. You might remember that we've had, unfortunately, a fairly high number of individuals who are hitting our specifics, so we have had quite a bit of stop-loss
the
reimbursements.
6 point whatever million, the 744 is the 15%.
That's correct.
Okay, just making sure I follow it. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Carrie, back in the second page of your presentation, CPI and average wage increases, did Lincoln County cut their employees' pay 6%?
Did they cut it? No, oh, it's highlighted in red.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's a good question. It's highlighted in red because I want to qualify that 6% was during a wage study that they had implemented. So if you see like the 2.7% that I think is highlighted for Pennington County, same thing. They had a wage study that was implemented that year. I think there's another one that's highlighted. So when there's, yeah. And the state is the only entity that we really know what they're doing for the upcoming year, and they're scheduled for 2.4 as of July.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie. We're a few minutes ahead of schedule, not many, but a few. We're scheduled for a break at 10:20. I'm going to suggest we do that because to give us a chance to ask questions or absorb what we've got in front of us. And our next section is scheduled to go for another hour and a half, so I think it's a good time to take a break. I'm going to ask that we come back at 10:25.
Who knows?
We now know where our money is and what we spent it on. Now we're going to find out what the new requests are, so I'm going to turn it over to Carol, and we're going to start with vehicles and equipment.
Good morning. This one? No, the left, the red one. This one? No, one more. That one, and then select one. You should have all the other slides, there we go, okay. Okay, I just had to catch up. So, yes, as Commissioner Carsey said, we've heard where the money comes from, where the money goes. Now we're going to talk about a few more specifics that we happen to have in there. First I'll start off with is on vehicles and equipment requests. Equalization has requested one additional vehicle, and that is related back to if you fund their position. So that is the position. That's what they're looking for. Planning is looking for a Dodge Ram for the chief building inspector. Their current one that they have is is a 2007 Durango. Commented that there is several areas of rust around the wheel wells and on the roof. So, and in the Dropbox, if you've gone through all the budget stuff, you've noticed that we have vehicle sheets on each of these positions so that you can go through and find more additional information on those. The Sheriff's Department is looking for 2 investigator vehicles at $30,500 each. Those are replacements, and those are for vehicles that they use for investigators and warrant task force operations. And Joe, I believe those are unmarked vehicles, correct? Those are 2, yes, so we don't have to pay for the lights and the decals and all that other stuff that would go on to those.
Can we
Those-
give one to the planning department? If they're replacement vehicles, are they in good shape? Yeah.
Yeah, they replaced their oldest ones, and how old are those?
Well, maybe we look at the review sheets that are in the packet. That's a good idea. I was wondering too if there's some we could switch around, so let's at least look at that.
Okay. And then they're also looking at their 5 patrol vehicles at $35,000 each, and that would be their normal rotation that they go through, correct, Joe? Okay, normal rotations that are on there. And of course, they need to have vehicle equipment for those for $20,250. The other vehicles that are listed on there are highway, and the vehicles they're requesting is a pickup road crew truck, and that would replace a 2010 vehicle. They have 2 plow trucks, which are their major investments that they have for a total cost of $540,000. I did note that when I was looking through the individual worksheets on there, that between the 2 current vehicles, they've spent $77,000 in repair and maintenance in the last 5 years. So those are costing a bit of money to take care of. They're also requesting a new loader, a John Deere loader that would load salt and equipment that they would have for $260,000. And they want to replace a backhoe that they seldom use or isn't as efficient for them to use with a excavator. And that would give them more flexibility in what they need to do and would surplus off the backhoe for that. So
Do
I'd ask-
those, you put highway fund there, does that equipment come out of the highway fund?
Yes.
It does. If you're on the phone, please mute your phone.
So those are the vehicle requests that you have. I will comment that last year you approved the commission office to purchase a new vehicle that would be able to be used by you guys, checked out by department heads, that type of thing. We have not purchased that vehicle at this point through the year because, to be honest, nobody's going a lot of places right now. And I don't see any value in purchasing a vehicle that we just sit out in the parking lot at this point. So I don't know if by the end of the year we'll look at doing that, or if that might be something we request carryover with, but we'll work through that.
Did you have a
I
question?
didn't hear what your question was about the highway vehicles, because there's interruption on the phone, sorry.
Oh, I had asked if those were actually coming out of the highway fund or general fund. I didn't know that we could fund vehicles out of the highway fund.
Okay.
so, yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions on this at all? When we come later on, one of the questions I'll ask you is if there's anything extra that you want brought in for people to talk about, discuss, present additional for, and you can certainly, if you have questions about equipment, that would be a good time to do that.
I'm going to raise a question, but I'm not expecting an answer at this point. And that is the plow trucks. I know that we've been replacing those the last couple of years. And I'm just wondering, and I don't want an answer now, if just in light of our budget problems or budget expenses that we had last year in the highway department, do we want to continue on that for this next year? Or do we want to hold off on one? I don't know where I haven't really looked into their budget.
Sure.
Just a thought. Do we delay one for a year, or delay 2 for a year? I don't know if we even
And I do
could,
know
so.
that Hank happens to be here, if we want to double check. I know that Hank and Shannon were planning, so maybe if you want to hold that question for a second.
And I'm kind of thinking along the same lines, Commissioner, with the new highway super coming in to, if
Can
we
maybe
fund
talk to
one
him
of them
about it.
maybe, and is the philosophy going to change with a new facility and so on and so forth? What do we look at doing, so?
And we may have plenty of time to look at that.
Yeah.
So, just a thought, so.
Hank, they had comments. Any comments at all about the new 2 plow trucks that you're looking at?
Did you want me to re-ask my question?
Yes.
My que- Yeah, I know. I just said I didn't need an answer right now, but the two plow trucks that you have for next year, you know, we know we've been replacing every year, trying to update our fleet and stuff. Right, and so then we're just, yeah. Just wondered of it, you know, in light of that, we spent our balance down so far in the highway department last year with a lot of big projects, if we wanted to hold off on maybe even considering doing one of them instead of two of them.
No,
but
man, we need
don't-
to do, we, right now, we have 4 plow trucks that they don't make anymore. We cannot buy parts for these trucks. We need to get, we bypassed that last year.
Last year, okay.
For that. We can't go another year. We have to get these trucks downrange, meaning the ones that we have in inventory sold, because as they break, we can't remanufacture these parts.
Okay,
So, I
That's
mean,
good.
we.
you already did
The plow-
that.
Well, we're critical mass on plow trucks. We need to start that 9-year cycle back in again, because we won't be able to repair these trucks.
Okay, thanks.
I would like to interject one comment in that area, and that is that we've got a slide coming up here that's going to show you where we project cash reserves to land.
Okay.
Assuming we hit 2021's budget and factor in 2022's budget, so
Okay.
that might help
Okay.
answer
Thanks.
your question.
Great.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Hank.
Thank you.
Correct.
Okay, with that, we will switch over to fixtures, furnitures, and then also talk about highway equipment. This is a little bit, I don't know if I want to use the word cumbersome. Kim's smiling as I use that particular word. Cumbersome because we've got some expenses that are popping up in '21 because we've got the extension building being completed that I'm going to talk about. We are looking at additional, using COVID dollars for some tuning, readjustment, refreshing down in the auditor's office, possibly down in the treasurer's office. So I'm going to talk about how this number may morph a little bit and where we're talking about that. So anyway, I'll start at the top. And you can tell I'm not used to running I'm used to these wonderful people who make all this stuff work for us. Okay, so the mail opener that's taken care of, correct? That just happened like in the last 5 working days? That information came about. So that 60,000 can be pulled off. The state magically is going to pay for some things?
60 is for the FF&E, which is separate from the mail opener.
Okay.
That's the refresh of the furniture, the auditor's office.
Okay, thank you. And that $60,000, if things go perfectly, we would actually request and spend that in FY '21, if we can make this work.
Okay.
The treasurer of $78,000 is just a ballpark number at this point. You're aware that Dr. Tracy's going to be coming in, doing some work with her on lean and efficiencies and how to provide the opportunity for people to be even more productive and satisfied with their environment and workflow that's out there. Again, in the perfect world, just as with the auditor's office, that would be spent this year, that hopefully we would go through and do those dollars. And again, basing that upon the fact that they're going to have new cubicles, higher areas, so hopefully we can adjust that for COVID dollars that are out there. The state's attorney money is going to include $163,000. That will be 2022 dollars because that will be part of the remodel, because eventually this space, second floor, all becomes state's attorney's office. State's attorney is going to talk shortly about the software, and so we'll let him cover that at that time also. The courts, you guys have had the most recent conversation.
Yes.
You want to just update on that?
Yes, the request from the courts is in reference to installing some permanent plexiglass barriers throughout the office areas, and then also to potentially reconfigure some courtrooms. With the use of the new courtroom in the jail, that provides some opportunity for them to look at doing something different with the courtroom previously used for those arraignment procedures. And then they've identified another courtroom that they would like to make some changes potentially as well.
Does
And
any-
the
I'm sorry.
courtroom in the jail has been a win-win all the way
Okay.
around.
Yeah, it has been. Just a question, does the $100,000 investment from courts have anything to do with Lincoln County's relationship?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay.
There was reference to a request for an additional judge, and if that judgeship is granted, I think that's what would drive some of these courtroom changes.
Okay.
Equalization, we are planning that equalization will be moving in November, last half of November and early December. So hopefully that $205,000 will come from the FY '21. Will those be dollars that are spent yet this year? And those would all be general fund dollars. On top of that, you've got equipment of $557,700. And Shannon, I'm going to put you on the spot. Can I ask you just to address that real quickly? Because that is equipment that is designed for the new buildings, correct? And you talked about that during the department head, or during the presentation you did. That make sense? You want to come out? And I'm putting him on the spot, I will tell you that.
To make the numbers work, back when the budget originally for the new building was $10.4 million, there was, I believe, $500,000-ish worth of equipment that were not going to be included inside the budget for the building. And so the Highway and Bridge Fund was going to have to basically supplement the transition to the new building by paying for additional equipment, things like parts washers, Hank, help me out, air compressors, lifts, things of that nature. Power washers, you know, because we're not going to have a full automated wash, so power washers in the wash bay. Those kinds of things. And so I had a conversation with Kim just a little bit ago, and I think she's going to bring some good news forward, and I think it's going to make us all feel better about both the budget for 21, 22, and the new building. So I'm not too concerned, but yeah, I'm here for questions if you have them. I don't know if I answered the question I was asked, but.
I think you did fine.
You did great.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Shannon and Hank, thank you very much for jumping in. And just, Kim, as you talk, when we get to the highway fund, those dollars are part of that cash, correct? So that's already been budgeted in on there. Our next thing to go through and cover is from State's Attorney Hager, who will talk about software.
What was
Ready?
the $2,000 in the commission office?
Oh, $2,000. That would be just for us moving upstairs from odds and ends
Oh,
that need to
okay.
happen. Yep. Yes.
Talk a little bit about monies that are coming out of the 2021 budget and the 2022 budget. Can you separate these numbers between those two fiscal years?
I will ask the auditors to catch up on that, and we will get those numbers.
Because right now, I'm assuming they're all in next year's budget.
Yes.
Right,
And
so
those are
pull those
numbers
out.
actually that are not out of,
They actually have not yet been built into the budget. Those are
Oh.
part of the decision points built into the illustrations.
Okay.
But really, regardless of what year we actually expend the money, we're recommending that we're going to use cash reserves to fund these items, so they don't really have an impact on some of your other budget decisions.
They're not coming from revenues,
because
they're
of
coming
that.
from reserves. Yep. Okay. Morning, Daniel.
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
I appreciate this opportunity to talk about the software and where I hope that my office can get to. If you look at where we're at right now, it's not with a lot of pride that I stand here to say we are not an organized office. We lose time every day looking for paper files, sending emails saying this file's missing. Does anyone know where it's at? You know, and that represents people that have been looking for things that we need for court. That's creating stress in our office. You have lawyers who want the information that they're going to need in court. They don't have it. They can't find it. They talk to support staff. Support staff feels that pressure. They can't find it. We are not organized, and that's not a good thing. We are starting to have storage issues. I showed those pictures to you in my presentation. We're starting to fill old jail blocks with paper files that we're creating. I want to stop that bleeding, stop creating these paper files. I think that we can get there. We're not efficient right now. That's an opportunity, right? I think that we can get to a place where I can stand in front of you and we can be a leader in what a prosecutor's office should be doing, how we should be operating. And so I'm excited about that. But we have a challenge in front of us, but we can accomplish that. Why that matters is if you look at the caseload that my attorneys are carrying, the felony attorneys, their standards that say they should have 150 to 180 felony files. Again, it depends on what they are, right? No one's carrying 150 homicides, but they're not felony failure to appears that are those routine, really quick files. Our attorneys are carrying double that. We're really in the 350, some are pressing that 4. The magistrate attorneys, again, that level is around 400 to be effective. Some of them are carrying more than that. The reason that that matters is that kind of bleeds over into public safety. If we aren't effective with our prosecution, that's not a good thing for Minnehaha County. I do not want people living here or thinking about moving here to think, well, what about that crime rate? Those trends that keep going up. The prosecutor's office is not positioned well to handle those. Not being efficient affects our ability to get justice for our victims. When I showed you that 714, those are people, and they're coming into contact with my office, with the court system at a point in their life. Some of them have been physically harmed by loved ones. That is a low point in their life. And we need to be efficient, we need to be organized so that we can guide them through that process so that we can stand up in court and fight for those victims. And we have a lot of attorneys who are doing that, but we could be doing it better. This software that I'm proposing, Prosecutor by Carpel Solutions has been in business for over 20 years. They have this software in 450 other prosecutors' offices around the country, so it is not a new software. They have 60 employees that work for their company. 85% of them are devoted to development. I have no doubt that our IT department could develop a software if we had unlimited resources and time. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury. One of the things that I like about PBK, Prosecutor by Carpel, you'll hear me say PBK, is they roll out a new update every 6 months. So they take any issues or questions that these other offices are asking, say, hey, could we get this feature? They integrate that into their system, and then it rolls out to everyone. So you're not paying more for these updates. Every 6 months, this program improves. They're in a lot of counties. They're in South Dakota, Lincoln County, Union County, Brown County, West River counties. They also have demonstrated that they can work with large counties, Maricopa County in Arizona, a county that is at a size that we could get to, and that'd be a good thing. So they've demonstrated that they can handle that growth that maybe we're looking at. They support it well, complies with appropriate security standards, integrates with other programs. I can sit here and talk about how it has OCR search capabilities. It integrates with Westlaw Research, which is what we use. We contract with Westlaw. Document management, all that stuff. It's really me sitting here trying to describe, well, this is what a sunset looks like, right? Here's how it will benefit Minnehaha County. It benefits my office. We will become more organized. We will move away from the paper files. We can never be truly paperless. We'll always need, 15, 20% of that paper. But getting rid of 80%, reducing the number of file cabinets that as we remodel, we look at this FF&E, as we're remodeling and we need to make space so that these cabinets can sit there. My office has over 15,000 open files right now. Those are all stored in our office. And so we need to be able to get to those quickly, find them. I want to reduce that number that I have in the office. I've used this software. I've seen counties that have used it and successfully. It's nice to walk into court, take a laptop, take a tablet, and know if this court asks me about a certain case, I can pull it up. I'm going to be ready to go on it. I don't have to worry about saying, Judge, can we pass this to tomorrow? I need to find that paper file, you know, my business records on that file. We can get there. I can't tell you the value of reducing the stress level in that office, what that can do to their efficiency, their effectiveness, their desire to want to work here longer. There is tension over finding missing files. We should be past that point. This program can create workflow. So you can say, when I open a case that has a victim, I want you to put a task reminder in the victim witness assistance dashboard so that they'll know, reach out to this victim. You can create tasks automatically. You can say, okay, digital discovery team, pull these videos. It does the work for us so that we're not walking that file around saying, okay, victim witness assistant, please call this. When you're done, I need that file back because I need to take it over to digital discovery and then tell them to do something. Especially we have a program that's doing the work that we are spending our time and our resources doing. The victim side of this, I cannot stress the importance of making sure that these victims are accessing justice and accessing it quickly. There's a lot of frustration on the victim side with just the length of time that criminal cases take. Right? If we are more organized and we are more efficient, we can reduce that time. We don't have to keep explaining to them, well, this case got reset because we weren't ready to resolve it yet. You know, we have too many cases, so we're trying to scramble and triage these cases. That's where victims get frustrated. Again, it gives them access. There are victim portals in the software so they can have more information. They can more readily get access to their Marcy's rights. It can generate contact automatically. If I'm in court and I reset a case or a case gets reset, they can receive a text message instantly once that date gets in there. I don't need to take that file back and say, okay, victim witness assistant, please tell them what this court date is. You know, we can know that they are getting quicker information and it can give them peace of mind, right? Instead of worrying about, okay, what happened at court at 9 o'clock today? Well, the attorney's not back with the files yet. They can know, they can have that access. The defense attorneys and judges will benefit from this software because if we are organized and we are efficient, they don't have to ask for delays in cases because we've provided them everything. We've reached a resolution. Their clients who are sitting in jail maybe leave the jail, whether they're going to the penitentiary or we've reached a deal that allows for them to come out of custody. So if we're more organized, that benefits defense. It benefits the judges, right? They can say, hey, Mr. Hager, can we address this case? You know, this defendant says he has another case that has a warrant. We can handle that. You know, it's less time in court. That's real savings, right? If we are not having to delay these cases unnecessarily, that's a good thing. Law enforcement, again, if they're not receiving multiple subpoenas to the same court date that just keeps getting reset, they don't have to worry about finding babysitters. They don't have to worry about finding people to cover their shift, right? The quicker and more efficient that we are, that has a ripple effect across all of criminal justice in Minnehaha County. That's a good thing. The data that we can collect from this is valuable. I believe in data and analyzing it and seeing where the trend's going. How do we handle this? What are we doing that's effective? What are we doing that's not effective? This can create that. It can help us navigate that. Kind of disappointingly, as IM26 and Amendment A have come to the forefront, but I get a lot of questions about, well, how many Delta 9 THC cases do we have? I can't differentiate that right now. I could tell them this is how many controlled substance cases we have. You know, we have thousands of those. I could go into those individual cases and start tallying. We can increase our ability to get usable data and be more effective and make sure that our diversion programs are working, that our juvenile diversion programs are working, that the trends that we're seeing, can we be effective in curbing those and increasing the ones that we want to see increase? I'm confident and excited about where we can be. I think that this office can be very organized, very efficient. We can move away from paper files. I can stand up here in the future and not say, I need 10 lawyers, I need 10 support staff. We can slow down my request for more people. And if I'm not generating more lawyers, hopefully the defense attorneys can do the same thing. I think it can pay dividends. We can make this program work for us, it can work well. Again, organized prosecutors will cause the system to be more effective. Better justice for victims, that's why I'm asking for this. There are, I guess within the details, there's about $215,000 upfront cost. There's approximately $40,000 to $50,000 in licensing fees going forward. So you think about after that initial upfront cost, that's less than a legal office assistant. So if I could have one legal office assistant that could have the impact that this software could have in my office, I would encourage them to apply. I would love to hire them, but it's not a reality. So I do think that there's minimal cost going forward. There's a work group that Commissioner Bender, Monty have asked me to create. I have someone from the Public Defender's Office, someone from the Sheriff's Office, someone from my office, Chris from Equalization, just with what he's done with software. Setting that up, talked with PBK. They would love to come give another demo so that they can understand what this software does, what we currently have, you know, and help make a good decision for our county. But I'm confident.
I think you've done a great job of selling the, the solution. I know there's questions, and I know that we probably have questions of Monty too. So much of our IT is, as you said, homegrown, so there's something off the shelf is interesting. Commissioner Heiberger.
I have 4 questions because you answered one of them.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want me to fire all 4 or if you want me just, I'll do one at a time. They're fairly quick, I think. So if we gave you the software, could we take off some of that additional staff that you've requested?
Ultimately, you have that control, yes.
Okay.
I think I'm concerned about where our caseload is with our current staffing level, but I also, I'm a conservative. I don't want to grow my office for the sake of growing it. I think that this software would be my primary concern.
Okay.
And so just the reality, yes, there are people who are working hard and paying taxes, and so if I had to prioritize, it would be the software.
Next question was, so somebody has to, do we have to hire an outside agency to come in and onboard this thing? And that's like the whole wrong way to say that, Al, but if we're getting new software, who comes in and puts it in, and then how do we migrate all those files that are sitting over there, and do we? And so what's the cost? Is that included in that original cost?
It is. They have, in addition to those beginning licenses, their quote, so in that $214,000 includes project management, pre-implementation services, so days on site, data conversion, internally developed systems, a mock go live and system administrator training. They do that a month before it goes live. There's document template setup. Now again, I do think that with them being in other counties, some of that document template might be done. They have on-site training. They provide 5 days of on-site training so that they go through. They want to make sure that we're ready when we go live. Some of the, again, I've been in Lincoln County when we moved to this software. There's going to be growing pains. It's a hard lift for people, but essentially say, okay, here's where we've started, and we are putting these files in going forward. As we have other cases that come up, we can, you know, whether there's a motion to revoke, you take those and you input them in. How we want to handle our older files is another issue, but what I'm saying is let's stop creating at least 12,000 new files every year, because that's what we're doing.
And I think I only have one left, and that's what, and you did mention that there's a task force looking at it, but I'm just wondering how it integrates with the Public Defender's Office and Public Advocate's Office, and if it's going to work, because we do have some type of software that Monty's office has created, and we don't want to leave them all behind and then have another $250,000 you have to spend on 2 more offices. And so just wondering how that's all going to flow together. And
There are interfaces and there are portals that you can get with this software. That's why I've asked for more than that 215. Again, that's something that can be determined by this group. From my perspective, I don't think that there's any reason that stops the PDO or Public Advocate's Office from using the software that they have. I don't think that this is necessarily exclusive, but I do think that Prosecutor by Carpel is willing to work with integration, interface with programs as long as they're willing to work with them.
Okay, thank you. That answers my questions for the moment.
Okay. Commissioner Benega?
Do we have the equipment needs that we would anticipate, excuse me, for this integration? And what about storage? It seems like we got files everywhere, except in your office. You have the cleanest office I've ever seen in 12 years, so. The real, which is, I know it's all in your head, but anyway, is there other equipment additions that we're gonna have to consider in the software purchase that we don't currently have?
That might be better answered by Monty.
Okay. There's usually a little bit more equipment need than the software need, so.
Yeah, it does work, obviously, with Word, Windows, those programs, so there's not, I don't think there'll be any purchase from there, but, yeah.
Well, I'm impressed with your presentation, and frankly, when you walk through your office, I think there's also a significant need with just getting rid of the clutter, to be honest, and create less stress.
I'm a big believer in that. That's why I try and keep a clean desk, because it starts to bother me if there are piles. I understand different people work in different ways, and I can't make everyone have clean desks, but I do think that there are some fundamental efficiencies in organizations that we can take advantage of.
No. All righty. In the interest of time, thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yep. All righty, moving on.
Thank you, Commissioners. I just want to appreciate Daniel kind of jumped in at the last minute when I said, can you do this today? And was willing to say yes to that. Commissioner Bender is not here. She is liaison to both IT and State's Attorney's Office and has had a lot of conversations and is anxious to see some conversation moving forward. We recognize that this is not a decision that you would make on the flip of a dime that goes through. We recognize all of that. I just want to mention, just because we always want to temper expectations, the ERP was 4 years, planning and implementation. Does that sound about right? 4 years. Zerker, 2? Does that sound about right? Okay. So I just want to temper, because when it comes on board, it doesn't mean that in 3 weeks or a month, it's up and running. It's not, it just doesn't happen that particular way. And as you talked about, there's a lot. How do you move things forward, legacy, all those other kinds of things that go into it. Daniel did mention about project management with the Zerker and the ERP systems. Yes, those companies have their own project management. Historically, what we've done is we've had an outside firm serve as that. Barry Dunn has served as that. It's kind of like serving as the owner's rep that we've done on the building committees. So we'll just mention that. With that, we'll turn over to outside agencies. Melinda Storley's going to present them, because she is the one who's working with them, not every day, but every week, is working with outside agencies, and we'll take you through those.
Good morning, Commissioners. The outside agency budget requests, these are donations of financial support to a variety of organizations, either by statute, contract, or historic practice. All of the applicants were given 4 weeks to submit their funding applications. There was a new section added for the fiscal year 22. The section requested that applicants list COVID-19 funding received in 2020, as well as funding anticipated in 2021. Examples of that would be the Paycheck Protection Plan and state grants. We'll begin with Southeastern Behavioral. They are requesting $169,468. We pay $1 per capita based on the 2012 census update. We do not have the final number for the recent census, but the population was estimated at 193,134 as of July 1st, 2019. I recognize that an increase may be considered at some point after the census comes out for 2022. They have also requested a donation of $5,000 for each drug court and mental health court. The next is animal control. This service is under contract with the Humane Society. They are requesting $48,500. They take care of strays and other animal issues outside of the city limits. The Humane Society is asking for an increase in their hourly wage. The current contract will expire December 2021. The hourly rate in Section 2 can be addressed at that time. The next is CCOG. CCOG is an annual membership due. They help the county with grant facilitation. And the next after that is the Sioux Empire Fair Association. They're requesting $250,000. We contract with them for the management of the fair and other year-round activities and provide financial support of $150,000 a year, as well as dedicating building funds in the amount of $150,000 for improvements and $50,000 for asphalt. We did provide a one-time funding for their 2019 audit at a cost of $14,000. A copy of that report has been added to their funding request packet. The next is Ivc Housing. Director Gary Tushin stated that Carroll Institute did not need to apply for fiscal year 22 funding because they don't have any programs needing support at this time, and also the Link Triage Center is now providing detox services. Under donations, agribusiness is asking for $2,500. Ambulance service is $194,500. If you look down at the bottom of the, where is the screen? Well, the bottom of the page for outside agencies lists Del Rapids requesting $55,000, Garrettson requesting $60,000, and Humboldt requesting $79,500. The Jasper Community Ambulance, MedStar Paramedic Ambulance, and Paramedics Logistics did not submit a request for funding this year. After that, we've got Children's Inn. They are requesting $298,800. Historically, there's been an understanding that Minnehaha County will provide support for the first night of stay. They also receive 40% of domestic abuse funds in previous years. The Compass Center, if you recall, the 2 previous years, Compass Center funding for the Family Violence Project was redirected to Lutheran Social Services. But this year, and so then in return, they would benefit from the Domestic Abuse Fund for 20%. But this year, they are requesting $26,600, and that is likely for 2 of their major programs in counseling and victim advocacy. They also have some education and prevention programs. Then bringing us to Lutheran Social Services, they are now requesting $36,500 for the Family Violence Project. Let's see here, we did Children's Inn, Minnehaha Conservation District. Per state statute, the county state's attorney's office shall provide legal services for civil matters to assist them. And they're requesting $2,000. Now, out of the Domestic Abuse Fund, these are funds that are that the money comes from the marriage fees and the divorce fees collected, not the general funds. Children's Inn is requesting $27,000. Family Visitation Center is requesting $30,000, and again, the Compass Center is requesting $13,400. The increase projected will be 40% to the Children's Inn, 40% to Family Visitation, and 20% to the Compass Center of our usual allocation for them.
Are those in addition, Melinda, to the requests that they had up above?
Who's that?
Pardon me?
On which agency?
So like Children's Inn, Family Visitation, and Compass Center. So Compass Center has asked for $26,000.
Yeah, plus what they will receive under the Domestic Abuse Fund.
They want the top ones and the bottom ones?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Very good job.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that legible to everybody? I'm just going to try to shrink it down so we can display the whole chart. But this is basically a cash reserve analysis that incorporates where we ended in 2020, along with where we project we would finish 2021, and the budget requests for 2022. And what this identifies for you is that if you look at the 2020 column at the very bottom, we ended the year with a cash reserve in the highway fund of just over $4 million. Our budget for 2021 would build our cash reserve by $873,000. And we're projecting that they will achieve that budget result, and that would then end the year of 2021 with cash reserves of $4.9 million. For 2022, we've included the budgeted revenues and project costs that the highway department submitted in their budget request. And in addition, if you look down at that equipment line, we also included the FF&E request for the new shop facility, including the new shop equipment and a limited amount of furniture. That request was $557,700, I believe. So all in, we could still build cash reserves by as much as $1 million in 2022, ending that year with a cash reserve of nearly $6 million. So this is just to demonstrate that the budget requests as submitted do not deplete our cash reserves.
Okay. And that's assuming that equipment purchase.
Yes.
Yep.
No, that's part of the 559. It is. Okay.
When we show estimated highway fund revenue, part of that's obviously the fees, but, excuse me, do we have an itemization on what the state or federal grant revenue might be?
That revenue is not budgeted in this number, but I believe the project costs take that into consideration so that what we're budgeting for overall project costs is net of that grant revenue.
Can I say
Is
that
that-
a different way?
Sure.
It's not that Kim is wrong, it's just that the way that we budget for those kinds of projects is, if it's an 80-20 match, the 80% not part of the budget. The 20% cost match is. So the revenues don't come in, but our costs do. And then if we get the project, we're good, and if we don't get the project, we're a little flush. Does that help?
We don't spend the 20%. Is that what you're
Correct.
saying?
If we don't get
Yeah.
the grant.
Okay.
Not sure that's the way I would handle it, but
You want to see the grant money coming in too.
absolutely.
But if they haven't gotten the grant yet, that's what he's saying. If they haven't gotten the grant yet, he doesn't want to reflect that there's a possibility of a grant out there, so he's just putting the expense in. If we don't get, because if you get the revenue, eventually that grant money ends up in there, but we're not accounting for grants that we don't have.
And at that
Right.
point, then, we would do a budget supplement.
And add that
and
to the
rec-
revenue.
For the receipt of those grant funds.
That's where I get the
Okay.
issue.
All right.
Yeah, yep, thank you.
Because if you're doing budget supplements that are not budgeted, you're not really following the process on what the state's giving us, what percentage of our budget's coming
Right.
from the state and the feds versus frankly out of the county's budget.
And those supplements also, those are automatic supplements, so you are authorized to proceed with a supplement action without having a public hearing or any other notice requirements
Right.
associated.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Kim. Bond debt projects.
Next slide will just answer some of our previous questions. So debt service for Minnehaha County in 2022, we estimate at $6 million, right? So this would include the issuance of an additional $10 million in debt to complete the highway shop construction and the extension building remodel, right? We don't know what the exact costs are on that. I think it's going to be something less than 10, but maybe more than 5. So, but we've got $10 million additional issuance this year, and then just kind of as a give some, to see how that relates to things that $6 million represents about 8% of our appropriations expenses. I would think that's a healthy number, right? I don't think it's a number to be concerned about, but I think it's a healthy number. And then on the graph that, or this chart, we do kind of just show how some of this stuff rolls down over time, right? We've got 2026, the Human Services bond gets paid off. 2028, you have the courthouse addition paid off. So you can see how some our bond payments do decline over time. Any questions on that?
Looks good.
Okay. And then, so this is our building fund summary, right? So that just shows you where we had 2020 actuals. Let me see if I can shrink that down a little bit. Nope, can't do that. So yeah, where we ended the cash in 2020, about not quite 4 million, but then in 2021, where we're recommending we transfer that 13.3 million to the general fund, or from the general fund to the bond fund, that would put 2021 at a balance around $19 million, a little bit more. And then we showed our, for 2022, that reflects the remodel of the administration building, where we're paying for that out of cash. But it would still leave us at an over $17 million in the building fund for potential future projects. Any question on that? Okay. Yes, Commissioner?
I thought maybe Gerald would say something, but he's not saying anything
I'm
about.
thinking I can't do both.
It's good to engage the brain before the mouth, yeah.
We've got 500,000 in for the Sally Port and JDC. And so Jamie and Mark and Gerald and I are working on, and I'm hoping it's going to be soon, but I don't know where we're at on it, on numbers of updates that have to be done to JDC. And we have to obviously meet with you about where the money is to replace the JDC. And because it's not just the Sally Port that needs to be done, it's the courtroom, and there's significant structural issues to that building. And so there are people working on this. We will need money probably in the building fund. I don't know if there's some in there this year or next year to start. I don't know whether it's travel. I don't really know, because I haven't been on the other building projects intimately, and so I don't know what the next steps are. And Gerald's been helping with that, and so.
I think we have 500,000 in 2021 for the Sally Port, right? And that kind of questionable whether that's going to be spent this year, right? So if it's not, I guess you'd have it for future use.
We won't be building the Sally Port, but there will be some expenses. So just not quite there yet.
So you could substitute, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Are we going to a county cemetery discussion?
I didn't bring up any notes for this, because this is going to be, we're going to have lots of people jump in on this conversation. I appreciate Shannon being here. Who else do we have? Do we have anybody else on Zoom about the about the county cemetery? Anybody from HS? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. So as we get into this conversation, and I'm going to provide just a little bit of background, and then I'm going to ask Commissioner Heiberger to explain about the call and what kind of moved this forward. Out of there, we have a county cemetery. I think we're probably the only county in the state that has their own county cemetery. It is located next to the highway department, to the west side of that. And I don't know how many graves are out there right now, but there's several hundred that happen to be out there. And we probably do 8 to 15 burials a year. I would guess something like that. The challenge that you're going to hear in the conversation is that who's really responsible for taking care of that? We are very fortunate that Highway has been very generous over the years about digging the graves. As a matter of fact, in the fall of each year, you guys dig 6, 8 graves. They dig before the winter sets in, and they fill them with sand, so that we don't have to pay somebody to come in and heat the ground and do all those things that are out there and pay for those particular expenses. We also have a contract with Phil Schmidt, who manages Hills of Rest, and he has been very generous about working with us to make sure that paperwork is done correctly, things are filed correctly, we're following statute, all those things that go into doing that. One of the projects they did in was it last fall, this spring, when you guys went through and did markers, or you did more surveying out there?
We surveyed flats basically to prepare for more additional
Yes.
plan.
One of the things that I know I've been very vocal on is we want to make sure that with the price of property, and I would not want to have my future predecessors come in 15 years and say we're out of space.
Your future
Out there.
predecessors?
Yeah.
Successors, thank you.
Oh.
Future successors would come in and say we're out of space out there. So how do we make sure we're using that space
Back to
as
the
well
future.
as what we can? And they have several hundred more plotted out there. And room for more that's out of there. So that cemetery will last well beyond all of us that happen to be in this room today. That's been important to us. So that's what happens with that. We do not put any markers up. We've been very fortunate that the IOOF, Oddfellows Group, has been very generous about doing that as a volunteer project. They just had their second round last Sunday. They started with the infants and children, and I believe they've moved on to some other people at this particular time. The highway department is kind enough to mow and to do some basic shoveling that's out there of snow. I know that Hank had reached out to me about a month ago and said, hey, we want to do some seeding out there. Where can we do this with expense? So we're looking at doing some additional things out of how to make that work, because that really is not a highway expense. So at some point doing seeding that's out there. I'm not sure with the drought coming on board that this is the time of year to be doing seeding, because obviously we don't water grass that's out there. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Heiberger, who's going to talk about just the call that you had last week, and we can just have a conversation.
So I'm going to start out with Carrie from Human Services, and I am her liaison. And we've had this conversation, had started this conversation about 2 months ago about who's taking care of the cemetery, and it's just a wealth of people. And it's not really Human Services Department either to be taking care of it. They're taking care of the, getting the person buried and the cremation part of it. They're doing their part. So we have 3 different entities doing it. Nobody's really taking care of the park. So I got a call our last commission meeting after I went out to the car from a young lady who has 2 family members that are buried out there. And some of this is past history. For a while, the gates weren't being unlocked. And so she said, I can go to Hills of Rest and visit some of my family members, but I can't go to the county because we don't know when that's going to be locked or unlocked. Well, part of that comes down to it was being locked when highway wasn't working. So if they have Friday off for the summer, my understanding was it was locked all day Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So now currently we are, I think, leaving it open on Fridays. Is that right? And it's maybe open through the weekend. I'm not sure. Okay, but there's a concern about, I have family members here and we can't even get into the cemetery because nobody opens and closes it because we don't really have anybody in charge of the place. She did also raise concerns about the condition of it. And when you've got just the highway trying to take care of it, not really any parks person that's responsible for it, I'm not throwing you guys under the bus at all. I just think it needs to find a home to land in, and there's no money in the budget for it. And I think this should not be, and I don't mean it this way, but it shouldn't be a pauper cemetery. This is where people are buried, and it needs to be a place of respect, just the same as Hills of Rest is, so that when you go see them and go see your family members, you can get in and you can have access to your family members. And I think that we can do better. And Carol and I have thrown out all kinds of ideas. I mean, does it end up under Parks Department? They don't have a way to mow it, so it's still probably have to be highway mowing it. But does it Parks Department to make sure that if there's trees trimming, or if there's a fence that needs repairing, or who's gonna unlock this? Do we see if there's another full-time employee like the sheriff's office? Sorry, I'm not throwing the sheriff's office under the bus either, but can they open and close it on the weekends when the highway's not there? I just think we need to do better by our citizens. This lady has been representing a lot of people that have family members who live out there that just didn't know what to do. She said it took her a year to find me, which actually the shopping news finally called Carol Tweet, and Carol Tweet said, call Cindy Heiberger, because she said, I've called so many people and nobody knows. In fact, she called up Hills Arrest and chewed them out, which it's not Hills Arrest's responsibility either, so.
Now, I talked to Carrie Benz about this yesterday.
Kind of in a nutshell, sorry.
Yeah, and a couple comments that are out there. One, and Shannon, if you can clarify this for me, you open the drive-in gate during your hours, but people can still walk in.
Yeah, there's a man gate that sort of prevents vehicles. It's a little U-shaped kind of thing. You might see it in ballparks or something like
Yeah.
that. That's my understanding that is always in place. Maybe that person just didn't see it or know that that's
I think they needed to drive in because of the condition of family members, and so there's just no access.
And Cindy didn't mention it. Cindy didn't mention it, but apparently there was potential vandalism.
Come all the way,
Yeah,
Shannon.
yeah, there was.
There was potential vandalism out there. And we're not sure still if it was vandalism or it was part of the recent event on Sunday where there was a gravestone that was not in compliance with the specification, which seems weird to have that, but there is specifications out there on what kind of grave markers are allowed. And this one was rather fancy. And we don't know if that was simply a remove and replacement or it actually got stolen. And so when people talk about opening it up for the weekends and things like that, vandalism, kind of weird, but it happens. And, I don't know what the answers are. I mean, since we're just having a discussion, the highway department's pretty good at mowing grass. We can treat weeds. We can trim a tree now and then, and we can plow snow. But we're not landscapers. We're not going to be great or even really interested in doing stuff like flowers and fancy hedges and things like that. So, I mean, if you need work on your tooth, you go to a dentist. If you need work on your garden, you probably need to talk to a landscaper. So, I mean, I'm just putting that out there that, I don't think it looks poor, but are we competing with humongous cemeteries in Sioux Falls in terms of how it looks and feels and prettiness and things like that? I would say it's a modest cemetery. It's functional. It's, I don't know how to say that in a nicer way. It meets the needs. Well, yeah, we put a new sign out there. There was some confusion about who to call, and part of the problem with the markers not meeting specification is there was not really published we don't even know who puts in the markers half the time or who pays for them or who installs them. If you were to ask me right now who installs them, I have no idea. I really don't.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not the family. I don't think it's Health and Human Services.
No.
So it's just weird. So I worked with Jamie. We got some standard sign out there for who to call for what kind of questions. And we also made a little page and a half sort of like standard operating procedures about communication lines and who's responsible for what. And Cindy's right. There's more than 3 entities probably involved here. And I would say the communications have certainly improved in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
To Sandy Kinder's credit, before she left there, she was kind of the only person that when we had questions about the cemetery, she's the only person who knew anything about it at all.
Who?
Sandy Kinder, former highway accountant.
Okay.
And that's where I learned most of my stuff, and then talking with Jamie and Carrie a little bit. But I mean, we're a highway department.
Yeah.
We're not cemetery managers.
I mean, this cemetery is over 100 years old. It goes back to the days of the county poor farm, and that's how the county ended up owning it. When we sold the land, we kept enough for the highway department, and we kept the cemetery, and we've been in the cemetery, and it is a pauper cemetery. I mean, it's for people when Uncle Jim dies and nobody claims the body, we end up burying and doing our best, but Yeah, I mean, it is
Chairman?
that way.
So, you know, in a related matter, there are 13 abandoned cemeteries in our county that our Abandoned Cemeteries Board takes care of. And trees fall there and mowing needs to be done, and some of them are 100 yards into a cornfield without any proper access, with Civil War veterans buried on the property, and missing stones, et cetera. They do their best, but they tend to be older folks, especially with the Genealogical Society. But it seems to me like there's a relation between these two things that we should maybe look into, and
I think, I mean, this is a great start to a conversation. We just need to figure out how much do we want to do. Obviously, we're not going to be hills of rest because we're not. But maybe we can do better than what we have done in the past. And it needs to find a home, even if that home is 4 people. I mean, 4 different agencies. It needs to be better clarified what we're doing, and maybe it is, we have the Abandoned Cemeteries group look at it, but then they'll need a little bit of funds. I don't know. But we need to have a thorough vetting of figuring out who we're going to do it. So who do you have talk about it? So,
Okay.
because I think we need a little bit of money in the budget. I'm not talking $50,000 or even $20,000 or even 10, but there needs to be some money there
I
to.
think we give the
do what we
abandoned
do.
cemeteries people 500 or 1,500 a year.
I think we need to have a conversation. And
Yep.
Carol, is there
Chairperson
a
could
few people
appoint a
we can
committee.
put together? Or?
with
Committee of one.
Carolyn's-
Oh.
All righty.
Sure, we could,
With a
we could
You know, it's a good
proposal.
discussion, and this is just the initial comments on it.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
you know, if nothing else, if somebody comes to us and say, hey, I heard you guys were talking about it,
Can we have Carol put a few people together just to have sit down and have a conversation or a Zoom or something and see what we can come up with for a proposal before the budget's over?
sounds good to me.
yeah. I know, and I went out to, did the family flowers this year for Memorial Day, and it was the similar situation to what the county cemetery was in the country. It's, you walk in, the gate was padlocked, so you weren't able to drive in. So I do think for probably most cemeteries, with the exception that are either municipal and large or private, the larger ones that are out there, that's probably what the situation is. Okay.
Buck, you're up.
No. Actually, I'm thinking that Munis demonstration, you aren't going to use that today, so we could bump that off. So we'll take and do that.
Okay.
So if you want to talk a little bit about what would you like to see come in, and as you lead into this, Commissioner Karski, some notes that I just made was, if you want to hear anything more about state's attorney software, the courts, recognizing that those changes were being made, forward Sioux Falls, I know you've received some additional information on. And the other thing that is not listed in the budget this year is anything to start that facility strategic planning process that we want to move forward with. So I would
Okay,
ask
so
for your input.
my thought is on the state's attorney software, Daniel had mentioned a committee involving the PA, public defender, the public advocate, the sheriff's office, basically all the users, because the state's attorney is not an island, and all the people that could be impacted by a conversion, how would that impact all these others? I'd look for a report from them, and hopefully they can meet soon and bring us information on that. I guess that's the big one, the elephant in the room when it comes to that one item. Outside agencies funding, I don't know what, we get contacted regularly from different groups. It doesn't matter if it's Sioux Metro Growth Alliance to the Children's Inn. I guess I have my own thoughts and questions when it comes to the Children's Inn that we're supposed to fund the first night, from my understanding.
That's a historic, I would add that the Children's Inn tells us that. I don't have anything in writing on that. Historical. The other thing, too, is that 20 years ago, as you know, a commission cannot encumber future commissions for decisions. So,
I have something to add to that, too, and that is that at that meeting, and I think you were there too, Dean, that they had also asked, and the sheriff's office had asked, that their funding be put back into the sheriff's budget. And so, just bringing it up, The sheriff said if we put it in his budget, he will take care of it, but that still comes out of general funds. So they've asked for it to be moved out of our general fund nonprofits. Just letting you know.
Other
You might hear
comments
it again.
on,
Mr. Chairman, didn't we give the TIF money from the Amazon, or aren't they taking the TIF money from the Amazon project and giving it to one of the economic development groups to use at their discretion? I mean, we're going to spend millions of dollars building Highway 130 into a bigger configuration, and all the money that the TIF will produce, instead of being used for that infrastructure, is going to be used to pad the pockets of those economic development people.
I don't think you're quite online there, Commissioner. Nobody's pockets are being padded, but they are being
Certainly, our
used
highway
for-
department is not getting padded.
They aren't being funded by it, that is correct, but we're not padding any developers' pockets. Any other comments on outside agencies?
I guess from my perspective, we have all the written applications in Dropbox, or will have the opportunity to read it, and I don't really know that we need to have them come in and explain it, because we're not going to be doing that with everyone else. We should be able to, if we have questions after we have the opportunity to review, then we can call them, but I don't think I want us to sit and tell
I agree with Gerald.
everybody right now that they need to come in and do their dog and pony show.
And quite honestly, out of our $86 million budget, and when it comes to funding a lot of these, it's a very small amount, and we have to take care of law enforcement and courts and everybody else, our judicial system, before we can start deciding what we have left to spend, and that's, the pie gets cut thinner and thinner, so we work on it, so, all righty.
Are there any departments you want to have come in specifically because of staffing requests?
No.
And historically, in the past, we've always scheduled them. We did not schedule them automatically this year, so I would just ask of you if there's any direction.
I can read.
Okay?
I'm not, unless somebody specifically wants to know more, I think we're going to leave that alone for now.
Okay?
Mr. Chair, I just asked Gerald, and I didn't see it. Did the Glory House apply for funding this
Yes.
year?
Yes,
They did,
it's on
okay,
there.
thank you.
Yep, they had about a $30,000 bump, if I remember correctly.
I think it's 25,000 they're requesting.
Okay, yeah, okay. All righty. Moving on then to the American Recovery Plan funds.
I just put some notes together. Ben and I have had a lot of conversations, have sat on a lot of webinars, have been reading a lot of material that's out of there, and just, we thought it was a good thing to just touch base with that today. $36.5 million is what Minnehaha County is slated to receive as auditor, Ben, brought in today, as Auditor Kite brought in today. He did receive the approval this morning, and anticipating in the next few days that half of that money will go through and drop. I wanted to mention the difference between CARES funding, or the CRF funding, and the ARP funding. The CARES funding is what we received in fiscal year 20, and that's that $13.3 million that the auditor's office has talked to you about moving over to the building fund. That was to cover expenses that were happening at that time, or to reimburse or to look at the expenses that were happening. The ARP funds really are future and transformational, as I've been listening to different people and picking up information. It's future dollars, it's transformational dollars. The Treasury dropped additional FAQ yesterday afternoon. I did get a chance to read, not as thoroughly as I will, but to read through it and made some notes from this. I've put my notes together into what do we know and what are the challenges that we have with this. What we know is that counties, cities, states, tribes are all receiving these dollars. Even the town of Sherman has an allocation that they will be receiving. There are many specific industries that are receiving separate support. For instance, there is a lot of money that's being dropped in the state for housing. There will be transportation dollars apparently that are coming through. There's libraries, money, special funding that's coming through. And of course, on the federal level, we do not know what the infrastructure bill is going to be, as there's discussions between the White House and Congress about that still occurring. The one language that you'll often see read across in here is it always says, to the extent. and that's kind of their caveat catch-all that comes across. For instance, ARP does not cover public safety payroll like the CRF did. When Kim was doing this last fall, the majority of her time was spent in public safety software, or payroll. Would that be correct, Kim? And there was a lot of detail that went into it. That is not in play for the ARP dollars, and the language is, to the extent that time is dedicated to COVID response, you could still go through and do that. But it has to be specifically dealing with responding to COVID out of there. So that is a significant change for us. One of the things that I'll mention that I'm going to tie back into with challenges is that there's no federal pre-approval that is required as part of this. That option does not exist. Records, we got a little bit more information in the new FAQ that came out yesterday, and you are to retain all the information for 5 years. The first interim report will be due August 31st, 2021. The first quarterly project and expenditure reports will be due, I believe, the end of October. Because we are not over a population of $250,000, we are not required to provide a recovery plan performance report. The one thing I thought was kind of interesting is we've been trying to figure out what does it cover for administrative fees. And I actually highlighted that last night when I was reading this through, because it's a question we've been having as to what is covered for administrative fees. And underneath 10.2, it says, can recipients use funds for administrative purposes? Recipients may use funds to cover the portion of payroll and benefits of employees corresponding to time spent on administrative work necessary to COVID-19 public health emergency and its negative economic impacts. This includes, but is not limited to, costs related to dispersing payments of fiscal recovery funds and managing new grant programs established using fiscal recovery funds. I think there's probably some gray that's not as black and white as probably what we'd like to do. Underneath 10.5, it says, may recipients use funds to cover the costs of consultants? And yes, recipients may use funds for administering the program, including costs of consultants to support effective management and oversight, including consultation for ensuring compliance with legal, regulatory, and other requirements. Here's the challenges that come into this. The county, or the city or the state, whoever it is responsible for determining what qualifies. And that's why you haven't gotten, I think, this big list that comes from Ben and I saying, here's the things we can do with it, is because ultimately that's in our hands to go through and do. So everything comes back to, when you read it, is go back to what the FAQs and the law states and figure it out. Revenue replacement, probably not. And that also has to be entity-wide. I think we figured out that the museum enterprise fund was down about $73,000, something like that. You can't just pull out $73,000. You have to look at it entity-wide from there. One of the questions we need to be asking is, what will the county be doing that other entities will cover? Because we've had conversations and said, can we do this? Well, we find out that there's already getting separate money or separate funding for that. So should we be doing that when there's a pot of money already coming down the pike for that? General economic development, the FAQ yesterday said no. You have to constantly ask the question, how does this expenditure tie back to COVID? One of the questions that's continually asked is, can we do this for highways and roads? And they go back to that language, to the extent. And here it states, to the extent that you lost revenue because of COVID, you could then use that money to pay for roads and highways. And we really didn't have any decrease in funds last year for us. There's part of here that's included with infrastructure, which talks about water. There's a lot of stuff that talks about water. As a matter of fact, I marked the page on that one because I thought it was very important for that. Because this seems to be fairly general in some stuff. And you can use it for projects that would be eligible underneath the Environmental Protection Agency's Clean Water State Revolving Fund or the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Some things this includes: treatment, transmission, distribution, source rehabilitation, decontamination, storage, consolidation, and new systems development. Publicly owned treatment works, non-point source pollution management, national estuary program projects, decentralized wastewater treatment, systems, stormwater systems, water conservations, efficiency and reuse measures, watershed pilot projects, energy-efficient measures for publicly owned treatment works, water reuse projects, security measures at publicly owned treatment works, and technical assistance. One of the questions that makes us a little bit nervous about getting into doing that is that if we were to give, say, $10 million to somebody to go through and do that, who's responsible for ensuring compliance with all the federal guidelines that go into it? That's an unknown at this point. And we would want to make sure that the county has full answers to ensure that they aren't accepting liability for something that we truly don't have the expertise in. So we don't rule it out, we just know that we need to dot our i's and cross our t's very well on doing that. So anyway, that's just an overview of that. We're hoping that in the next department head meeting, if not the next department head meeting and the next one then, that we'll be able to have some more conversations with department heads and start talking about different things. But some of the stuff yesterday excited me, and some of the stuff was like, darn, it's not going to work for us to go there. So that's what I wanted to mention about ARP.
Sounds like there's a lot of money for the consulting business to grow based on this, because everybody's going to need help. Remind me, Carol, it has to be basically allocated by 2024 and spent by
Correct.
26?
Correct. December 31st, 2024, you either need to have spent the money, and that spent by definition includes, you can have, projects under contract.
Okay. Other questions?
I don't have a question. I guess the thing that I would like to see is a kind of an executive summary of the information you've received on who's getting additional funding that's categorized under a different plan. Frankly, what some of the accepted practices are and what's not. Sounds to me like there's not really an application process or a audit at the end, other than the fact if you're over 250,000 people. So it's kind of fuzzy, but it's still, we got requirements we have to live with. So I'd like to know what the summary would tell us, what we could use and what we couldn't use. And I know
And we've
that's not black and white. but
No, we
gotta
have
more
started
guidelines than
something.
what we have.
With that, and hopefully in the next month or so, you're gonna get, I don't know if we're gonna be ready to pull not a detailed plan, but at least come through with those next steps that are out there.
Well, the department heads are gonna need the same information before they come back with some sort of project request.
Yeah.
So,
And that's why there are some things that we do think, nothing huge, that we can maybe pull out of the budget or we can assign to it. But at this point, we do not feel comfortable tagging anything, pulling anything out, putting anything in at this point.
I guess the bottom line for me is before we ask the project directors and the directors of every program what they want, we probably need to know what they can spend it on.
Right.
Correct. And Ben and I, we've talked a little bit about maybe putting a checklist together that says, okay, these are some things that, if it checks this, maybe we have, it's something we could consider. Process at this point.
My comment would be, nothing's black and white. And it's hard for us to give definitive direction to department heads.
It's not even gray.
No.
It's mush.
Yeah.
With that, do you want me to touch on what's next?
Well.
Budget process?
I see Monty's here. Were we going to be doing a Munis demonstration?
Do you want to do that, or should we tie it into next time, because they aren't going to use it today?
Okay, let's do that
I think
then.
it's a good idea.
Public comment.
Because I would forget.
Fresh in
between
your
now and
head.
Monday.
Yeah, just so a recap then.
Yes, you meet Monday afternoon in our next budget hearing, and at that point, we're going to throw it out for discussion, and you're going to have the chance to start giving us yays, nays. As you know from previous years, Kim is sitting there with her 10-key and her spreadsheets and is doing some drafting at that particular point. And then we will come back on Tuesday after the commission meeting, and you'll find out where we're at with magical numbers at that particular point, and what else you want to review, and see. At this point, things are really in your hand for discussions.
Carol, is Tuesday's meeting scheduled for like only an hour or something? I don't know if I have it in my calendar wrong, and so I'm just wondering if it's
It's
just
after the commission
really.
meeting. What did I put on there? Remember?
I have it 10 to 11:30.
So it's scheduled for an hour and a half. I just didn't know if I had missed
An
something.
hour and a half, but
Yeah,
and
that's fine.
again.
I just, yeah.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if it was supposed to have the afternoon blocked off, and I didn't, so that's.
You don't. I
that's
would anticipate that you could run into lunch that day.
That's
if-
fine.
If commission meeting goes long.
Okay, okay.
17th, are we still on for Thursday?
Not at this point. Not at this point. We just set the 3 meetings.
Okay.
I have conflicting meeting that day anyway.
Do you want me to talk briefly about what I was throwing out for $100,000?
Sure, marketing.
Okay. And I don't know that marketing is the correct term for it. But one of the things that we take pride on is serving the public. It is the absolute priority for us to go through and do. And we want to do it as effectively as and efficiently as we need to go through and do that. We also learned through COVID that we need to be proactive about how people can do business with us without coming to the county campus. We need to be more proactive than what we've been. We've dipped our toes into it. So what I would like to do, and again, this would come through, hopefully, the ARP dollars, because it would stress, how do we not have people handling paper? How do we not have people coming down here? Every person who comes down here takes a parking spot. Every person who comes down here brings a few stones of gravel in with them. And it takes time for us to go through and handle those. So how can we put a campaign together to help educate the community about how you can do things without coming down here? The first part of that would be even working with department heads to help them lift up the ability to serve the public by not having them come down here. So that's the purpose of what we're talking about there, is not having, how do we serve people the way they should be served without making them get in their car and drive down here?
How much did you have in there for that?
You know, I just threw 100,000 in.
That's what I thought.
And again, we feel fairly comfortable, probably as COVID dollars, because again, we're not having people come down, we're not having people handle paper, we're not having door handles exposed, all those other kinds of things that come into it.
Okay. Sounds good. We're now for public comment. Anybody here would like to add public input or public comment to the commission?
We're missing our regular one,
Or what?
regular public comment.
Oh, did you want to say something? No. Oh, okay. All righty. Nobody here for public input, since this is not a
We don't have
meeting
to
where we
adjourn.
make decisions. I can adjourn the meeting. We will see everybody again Monday at 1:30.
Yes, sir.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.